This is episode number 56 of DevOps Paradox with Darren Pope and Victor Farsick. I am Darren.
And I'm Victor.
And today we have a guest with us. Victor, will you please introduce our guest?
Yeah, our guest is a person whose name I never learned how to pronounce. Just. Something that ends with ust.
Almost.
Are you going to even attempt his last name?
Oh, no. That's out of the scope of this discussion. Depends. We're still having less than an hour. Yes, then we don't have enough time for me to try the rest. Anyways, Just is working with us at CloudBiz, and he pinged me a couple of days ago with some comments on one of the discussions. So, as we already did once or twice before, my answer was, let's discuss it in public instead of through Slack. So here he is. He's going to explain it all.
By the way, just to make life easier, we will refer to him as Jay for the rest of the day.
Yes, Jay, exactly.
Okay. Because that's okay, right?
That's okay. That's okay. I have a name that's not pronounceable in English, and a lot of international colleagues. The amount of times my name gets butchered is more than enough. Thank you.
Okay, so just for the record, why don't you say your name the way it's said?
All right, Joost van der Griend.
Now, Darin, you try to say that again, Darin.
No, there's no way I can. No, you're Dutch, correct?
Yes, I'm Dutch.
So it's a proper Dutch name.
It's a proper Dutch name, yes.
Okay. So let's set this up a little bit. The comment that Jay is now going to bring forward, it was around us rambling or potentially ranting about people not continuing to learn. Is that a fair summary? Because we talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
You stopped learning, you're dead, effectively.
Right, and right. So my personal point on that was always that I agree with almost everything that was said on the course of various episodes that you touched on this subject, right? So yeah, like the career advice episode and all that, and I think that that's all fine. What struck me a bit was the like last time we had like the AMA session on Friday, and I sort of mentioned that, right? So like, what about people that are mediocre and don't have enough time or capability to learn, to keep up and stay competitive in this market? And the answer sort of was, well, you've got to this point now, so then it's your choice to stop learning. And that's really where sort of had, well, I think that's true for, right? So sort of like my point there is that I think that's true for quite a lot of people, but not everyone. There's a lot of, I think, is a significant group of people for which that simply isn't true. They got to a certain point in their lives, right? They were able to go to university, everything's nice, they get married, something happens, life happens. They get triplets, they get one kid is sick or a parent dies, or right, lots of things can happen that life before and after that life-changing event is not the same, and you now suddenly see yourself with not having all that time, not having the capability of catching up, of not doing being able to spend as much time as you would like to be able to do that. So there is, like, at that point in time, I say it's no longer your choice. It's that, a choice that's forced upon you. It's not in your hands to say, well, I want to learn more, I want to spend more time, but honestly, I have more important responsibilities right now, and I know it's going to hurt me in the long run, but what do I do with that? How do I get that balance? Because I have more important responsibilities than just trying to improve my career.
I agree with that. But the problem is that not in our business, and this is not, I'm not now saying whether this is just or no. We can talk about that as well. But in our industry, basically not improving career is going backwards. I mean, on the knowledge, on the skills, right? Because everything moves forward very fast. So if you stay in the same place, you're effectively, so if you imagine our industry being a train, right? The moment you get off the train, it continues moving forward, and you are effectively going backwards relative to the train. Now, that is what is the real question here is whether that learning. So we're not talking about inability to learn, but simply not willingness to invest additional private time to learn, which is a completely valid thing to do. We shouldn't be working outside office hours to get up to speed. And the real question is, why do companies not allow learning as part of work life? Right? Kind of, shouldn't that be part of those 8 hours in the office?
Right, and I think this is right. We're sort of unraveling this question a bit more, this topic a bit further. Is that I see there are multiple things that happen, at least what different companies that I've worked for, that there's more or less willingness from the organization to invest in their employees, right? And so I've worked in the last few years prior to working to CloudBees. I was working at a small firm myself, and then as an external contractor at a bank. And the contrast was gigantic. So at the small firm where I worked, we had you could spend up to 10% of your official work hours per week on like side projects. And then the side projects could be almost anything, not literally anything. If you want to learn crochet, that's sort of in your own time. But if you think, well, we might want to do something with Kotlin in the future, that is a valid subject. And you can spend that in your own time. And if you have issues with the assignment you're on or with your manager, there's things you can do about that. And one thing we did there as well, we had some people that spend more time on that. So that was one. I was one of those people, and our responsibility was that, look, you're allowed to spend a bit more time of company time on this, but as a something that you have to do in return is to take all the things you've learned and bring them back into your organization. Bring the other people that are not able to spend as much time, that have other responsibilities in or outside of work, and help them up to speed faster. So maybe I would spend 80 hours learning a certain topic and then spend 5 hours trying to teach them to others to get them to the same speed. And what I've seen at the bank is we really had an issue that, okay, we want to get some of the team learning things related to Docker, things related to Kubernetes, because we wanted to bring the CI tool stack to Kubernetes. And literally the answer we got from the vendor of the not the vendor, the service provider, that from who the team members were working for. They said, well, if we're going to train them, then everybody wants that training, so no, we can't do that. And then the bank said, well, but they're not our employees, we cannot do that. So we have to sort of force it into our own work week to teach the other people as part of our sprint, because they were not allowed to get any training.
Well, that's just dumb. I'll say it. But although it's dumb, it's normal. It's a very normal practice that companies will not allow for time, or especially in that case, oh, you're not an employee? Well, we're not going to pay for your training. Or the other side, well, if you want the people that we're providing you to have this knowledge, you need to pay for it. It's a circular argument that nobody ever wins.
If let me know if you don't agree, but if you assume that not improving your skills means that basically your value is diminishing over time, then the only two options, preferably, you would be improving your skills on company time, preferable option, if not on your private time. And I can understand that is in many companies, company time is not an option, and for many people, private time is not a good idea because there is life outside office, and I can understand fully that you might not want to take away, let's say, time from with your kids in order to learn after hours. And those are all the valid reasons, but that still does not change, at least in my head, the fact that if neither of the two options are taken, then your value on a market is diminishing. And I think it's important that I'm stressing the value on the market, not inside of your company, right? So in your company, your value might stay the same, because if company is not moving forward and you are not moving forward, then status quo is what is really happening. But on the market, which is moving forward, you are effectively going back. And understand that those things are happening. But I don't have a third solution, right? Kind of, it's almost inevitable then that your value on the market is going down. And that is unjust. And I think that we should be greatly disappointed that companies do not see the value in us improving skills. But then that's simply that's simply a problem, that then there is no solution in those situations, at least not that I know. Assuming that the solution is not, sorry, I must stress this, I'm assuming all the time that switching to a different company is not an option either.
Right, because I can imagine that if you're in such a company for a significant amount of time, as you said, if your market value has gone down, it might be that the place where you're working now, you can get a good salary. You're sort of okay, things are good. If you now go outside and look for other jobs, you find that the cool jobs you can't do because you're missing the experience, you're missing the knowledge. Jobs that are equivalent, well, since you're having 5-year-old skills, you're not going to earn more than what you already have. So you're sort of like, well, I can jump ship, but I might have to take a dent in my paycheck in order to learn more things. And again, for some people, that's okay. For other people, say, yeah, but I have a mortgage, I have kids, I can't earn less and then potentially earn more in the future. That's a risk that's hard to take. And right, so I think that sort of compounds the problem you described there. So I don't see a easy solution. I do see a way to reduce the problem. So so in my comment to you, I sort of mentioned that as well, right? So how I see that we can reduce the problem or make it a less of a negative thing is so I would say it's a two-part thing. One side is some of the tools, some of the technologies, they're very difficult to understand because they've been built by people who already know, who are not, how to say, necessarily building them to be easier to use. So that's one thing that we maybe should bring in more of those experiences from, let's say, the people on the other side of the chasm, right? To get more of that user friendliness into more tools, into more of technology. And a second part is having other people build up better experience related to training, to learning, better learning materials, so that learning does not take 40 hours, but if it takes only 5 hours or 10 hours, that's then that insurmountable thing that you said, well, I don't have 80 hours of time in the next few months to learn this in my own time. And your boss is not going to tell you, well, you can take 2 weeks off. But if you could say, well, it's like 2 hours for 4 weeks, 2 hours a week, that might be something you can get away with. And so I think those are two parts of not a solution, but of a way to reduce the problem.
I would actually say that that's a valid argument, not for those situations that we are describing, but actually for any situation. In sense that the speed with which the industry is moving means that nobody can actually learn everything, not even everything that you might consider you need. So it is independently of whether you have 2 hours to spend or 20 hours to spend on learning a week. It is very important to be able to choose well what to learn. Let's put it that way, right? Because some things are easier to learn than others, some things are more valuable to learn than others, and so on and so forth. So, in other words, I fully agree. The only note from my side is that I think that that's equally valid for everybody. Not equally, valid for everybody. It's just that the less time you have, the more important it is to choose right what to learn in a way, right? To me, I have similar conversation, which are not really coming from the same angle, but I think can come to the same point when people ask me about Docker Swarm, how can they learn it and stuff like that. And my answer is, don't waste your time. It is not a worthwhile investment in learning because many other different reasons. But yeah, you need to choose what to focus on, right?
That as well. So that's where we're one, right? So that was literally part of my role, my previous company. That part of my role was really figure out where's the market going, which of these things are going to be interesting to us, right? We were a small shop. We had about 60 developers spread over a few different technologies. So like the Java group was like 25 people. So it's sort of like for us to be able to, if we train, let's say 15 people for certain technology, we need to be sure we're gonna recuperate on that, right? Because otherwise that's gonna be quite a big cost to us. So part of my role was to, okay, I spent more time, right? For how to say, right? I'm married, but I don't have kids, so I have more time than most of my colleagues who did have kids. So it's like I take the front. I take some leadership there to figure out, okay, what are all the different technologies that are coming? What are all the different things that are interesting where we're working with, or that is interesting for customers we are working with? And then how far are they along? I try out a few things, combine a few things, work out some demos, some examples, and then we evaluate. Half a year later, we evaluate: is this still relevant? Is this still moving? Is this something we should invest in? And then we figure out how do we get that knowledge into the team. And I think that's I think for most organizations or maybe industries or branches of industries, they need some of those champions that do that work, that go through the weeds, that figure out what are things that are going to stick, right? And I think there's a significant amount of people that are doing that. But I think the biggest problem there is that sometimes it's very difficult to figure out which people are doing that from, well, I'm working for this company and we're promoting our stuff, or hey, look, I'm working for a consultancy company and this is what we see in the market and we think this is valuable for you to learn. And I think that area is sort of conflated right now. So yeah, I would say it probably would make sense for most companies to have a few people that test out the water, so to speak, that go a little bit ahead of everybody else. But for companies that can't do that, or small shops, or people that are contractors or whatever, they need to rely on other people to do that, or parts of industry to do that. And I think our industry is failing.
Well, I'm going to jump in here because one of the roles you just called out was a contractor. If you are a contractor or a consultant, those are two very different things, but both start with C, just like cookie. It's a Sesame Street reference in case you're not getting it. Cookie Monster? Anybody? Okay, never mind. Contractor or consultant. As far as I'm concerned, I don't care if you work for a consulting company or you work for a body shop. It's neither of their responsibilities to take care of teaching you how to do something, because they're not making money unless you're sitting at a company. Now, there is such a thing as just-in-time training, but to say, because this is one of the classics back in the 90s, it's like, oh yeah, send us to a 5-day training course. Well, what are we going to get out of it as a company? Well, we might get a gig out of it. Companies say, no way, man, I'm not going to spend $2,000, $5,000, however much that week-long course was. And this just also comes back, I'm just because of my age, I've been through these cycles. I have worked for one company that actually invested in their employees, what I would consider investing in their employees. Most of the time, I never saw that. I had a kid, I had a wife, but if I wanted to get paid more, I had to suck it up. Does that mean I was away from my wife and child a lot? Yes. Do I like that? No. But it's what I had to do in order to take care of them. So sometimes you don't have a choice. Now, Jay, one of your responses back was you had a friend, or the story was, whether it's a friend or not, a guy had a child with special needs. And fortunately, that was not my scenario. Here's the thing I do want to say. If you're put into a corner with a child, with taking care of a parent, extenuating circumstances is what I would call those. Don't beat yourself up. However, just realize, okay, maybe I can't do the new thing now. Maybe it's just not now. Maybe it's the future for me. But for now, I've got to do this. What do you guys think about that?
Well, it is complicated, right? Because in this case, the kid with special needs, from what I've understood, it's gonna last a lifetime.
Right.
So in this case, it's a actual situation. So two of my classmates, there were a couple while we were studying together. After the study, they both got a job in tech industry, and they got a kid, and kid has multiple disabilities. So she stopped working. He works part-time. It's difficult, and right. So, and from what I can tell, like, that's gonna last forever. That's gonna last the rest of the life. So she had to drop out of the tech, and I cannot imagine someone in that position say, I will ever have that time, unless we can compress the time needed, unless we can make the new things easier to do, easier to use, easier to learn, and take up less time, so that it's easier to better material that is easier to jump into after X amount of time. Like, okay, I do a block now, I'll do a block maybe 3 months from now. 3 months from now, maybe my grandparents will come and take care of the kid, help take care of the kid for a few days. So then I have a bit more time. But I can imagine at that point in time, you might want to go on a little trip with your wife and not spend it on building your career. So I think it's going to be complicated. I think there's no single answer, because I'm pretty sure each of these situations will be unique. Right? But I do agree with you that that's a choice you will have to make. You have to make a sacrifice, and this is where I feel that the same as what Victor said. That's not just from the company perspective, and I do feel there's, at least here where I live, there's definitely a difference between contractor and consultant. How we feel contractors is sort of like you're on your own. You are sort of decided that you are good enough to do everything yourself, because you want to take more back of the paycheck, right? You don't have to give as much to your employer. And then if you're a consultant, you're part of a consultancy firm. The consultancy firm has its goal to make sure that they can keep being a consultancy firm in the future. That means that they need to stay up to date, and that means that they need to have enough employees in each key area of where the industry is going, to be able to have a business in the future as well. So what I see there is that for contractors, they will have to make their own time. They will have to spend their own money to figure out, to take courses and so on. Whereas the consultants, they will regularly get courses from internal. Usually they're tied to lots of different bonus structures or whatever. I don't want to go into those details at least, but what I've seen there is that they usually get taken care of more on that front. The company I worked for figured that it was too small to really do those things, so they really had to take a more personal approach, and that's why we got to the setup I described earlier. So I do feel that it is a complicated subject with many let us say possible ways to fill it in, possible ways to deal with the issues. I just feel that in certain parts of our industry, like some of the technology being too complicated to use directly, or with some of the documentation and learning materials not being of a high enough quality, that we are, how to say, ensuring that a large portion of the industry cannot keep up. And I think that's something we can do more about.
I think that we're all more or less in agreement here, right? If you don't go forward, you are actually effectively going behind because the industry is going forward, and then you need to make some choices. And then, to be honest, that's probably equally valid. Not equally, sorry. That is probably valid in almost every industry. It's just that ours is slightly special. That things might be moving faster than in others. But I guess that we could, if we would all be, let's say, doctors, right? We could have the same discussion, how being up to date is important. Just that we would probably not get to the same level of importance. Maybe things are not moving that fast. I don't know actually how fast it's moving over there. But still, kind of, no matter the circumstances, I still feel that you cannot not move forward if you want to stay status quo. By status quo, I mean being on the same level. And then, yes, we need to make some choices and see what matters more, I guess.
But here's another thought. So my mom works in public schools, and right, at least in the Netherlands, they have for different sectors they have like central agreements for labor. So lots of things are managed already there, right, by the unions, and some of the things that are managed in there is exactly like, okay, every year there's X amount of days that are required to be spent on learning, on keeping up, etc. So every year there's a plan for people that do work with these, for example, the kids in these classes or those classes or this level. This is what you need to do to keep up to date with what we've learned in the last few years about how to deal with kids of this age. And I think that what that does is it helps protect those people that would have to make this sacrifice, have to make these bad choices, right? I would say, because spending personal time on your career and not being able to spend it with your wife and kid, I think that's always a bad choice one way or another. And what I think it does, these kind of agreements will protect those who are in a weaker position, right? Those who cannot easily switch a job, who cannot easily keep up with everything. And maybe what is happened with our tech industry is that a big group of people in the tech industry is used to staying on top, is used to, okay, things move fast, so we do that. That we've sort of forgotten that even in the tech industry, we have people that are weaker. And weaker, I mean, in the ways of competition, in ways of dealing with the power struggle with their boss, right? And that there are not enough protections in there.
Okay, you bring out unions at the very end. I'll see if I can. Let me see if I can sum up my thoughts of this real quick, of how I feel about unions. In general, unions provide protections for people that aren't capable of doing things on their own. That's a very broad statement. Let me state it a little bit differently. I believe unions suppress the ability for somebody to actually make more and better money.
Yeah, there is always that. I think that we always have that problem with or without unions. It's kind of how to balance the need of certain individuals to move forward at at their own speed, let's say maybe faster often, and how to protect also people who cannot or do not want, and so on and so forth, right? That's probably it's a complicated subject. So I'm not myself extremely favor for unions, but also I'm probably in favor of more protection than in some countries, and it's a hard balance to find that not necessarily related directly with unions, but we still have the. And actually, now when I think about it, I don't believe I visited a company or was in contact with company that doesn't have a program for training, for learning, and all those things. I actually don't think that I was ever in such a company. I think that the problem is more that some people in between often prevent people from taking those advantages. So, you go to a typical bank, and typical bank has some kind of program that says, okay, within a year you have those courses you can take, you can spend this number of days learning and stuff like that. And then there is a typical project manager that says, yes, but not in this quarter, because this quarter happens to be critical. And whenever, and it's always this quarter, kind of like, next quarter it will be this quarter as well. So it's not that much. I feel that companies do not think that that's important and don't have programs for such things, but rather that some people are preventing individuals in such companies to take advantage of that. I'm yet to find a project that is not critically delayed and where we don't need to do extra effort, just this case.
And I think here we come back to, I think, the concept of like what makes a team productive and how do you do that well. And if there's one thing that we've learned via the goal from Goldratt, is that making sure that people are busy all the time is not one of those ways of being productive as a team. And I agree that what I've seen as well is that there's a lot of managers that simply don't want to understand this concept. They just feel like, yeah, if you just push now, then we're sort of back on track, and so on and so on. So what you described, I've seen that several times as well, and comes also back to the example I said that in the bank, right? The people from the service provider, like, oh no, we can't do that because. Right, that there's programs available, there's things available, material available, but we can't do that, or we can't do that now. Unfortunately, I've seen that too many times.
It's basically follow the money.
I wouldn't even maybe necessarily even agree with that, follow the money, because I do think that companies also recognize that getting up to speed is following the money and many other things. It's rather that bigger companies have different departments, and those departments have get different objectives that are often conflicting, right? There is some HR or learning or whatever department that has objective to push courses to the people, and then there is some other department, let's say product management, that has objectives to release a new feature yesterday. And then those two are conflicting. Individually, each of those departments or group or silos are doing the right thing, considering and looking at their objectives in isolation. And where companies are failing is to figure out how to create objectives, because we cannot have one single objective for thousands of people in a company, but how to create objectives that are not conflicting with each other. And this is not kind of to blame anybody, because it is really a hard problem. How do you create 100 different objectives that don't conflict with each other?
You have one person writing all the objectives.
Yeah, maybe.
But even then, that one person's going to get conflicted.
Yeah.
It's like spinning 100 plates at once. You might find that one unicorn that can spin the 100 plates at once.
But those people are going to be few and far in between. No, but I think that is also true, right? This that in many organizations that I've yet to find an organization where even only the software development lifecycle groups, whatever, right? Sometimes it's a department, sometimes it's several teams, but how those are working together, I've yet to find an organization that tackles that only that part holistically. It's already quite a lot of islands where there's conflicts between those islands already. Now, there probably are some companies out there that can manage these islands quite well, but most organizations struggle even on that level, let alone completely throughout the entire organization.
Okay, I think that's a good place to stop. Because if we start getting into islands and kingdoms, my ranting will go beyond my union rant today. So
You just mentioned part of my favorite phrase. I don't know if you heard that, islands of happiness.
yes,
One of the most ridiculous terms that became popular a while ago.
Islands of happiness, like Polynesia.
that's probably an island. Now, if you've listened to our past 2 episodes, we've talked about the tech industry should never have the right to name another thing ever, because we suck at naming things.
100% agree there. I don't know. From my perspective, naming things is something that is something so important to our industry and so often neglected that we just leave it to happenstance.
No, we come up with cool code names, but then we don't actually come up with what it really what it is.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. We leave it to happenstance. Somebody just like, yeah, we have it. It has a name, but it doesn't explain it. It doesn't help. It doesn't do anything. But we can fill another hour with discussing naming schemes.
Like naming drugs. Who the heck thinks of naming drugs? That's not what we're going to talk about. All right, if you're listening via Apple Podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. All of our contact information, including Twitter and LinkedIn, can be found at devopsparadox.com/contact. And if you'd like to be notified by email when a new episode is released, you can sign up at devopsparadox.com. The sign-up form's at the top of every page. And finally, there are links to the Slack workspace, the Voxer account, and how to leave a review in the description of this episode. We'll also have Jay's contact information down in the description as well. Any final thoughts?
There is one place where you can learn well. Buy the books. Buy the courses.
Oh, right. By the way, that's also down in the description of this episode. Go buy the books and the courses. It's been interesting seeing the people buying the stuff on Chaos and going through the courses.
And I would say would also be great to learn from those people that say, well, I'm not buying these materials. What are you looking for?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because if you're looking for something and you can't find it, tell us. And we'll decide if we want to create it or not. In all of our spare time, right? Of course, Victor right now, I guess, is the one that has a kid.
Yes.
Because mine has been gone for a few years.
Yes.
Jay, thanks for hanging out with us today. Everybody go have a fun rest of your day. And thanks again for listening to episode number 56 of DevOps Paradox.